Welcome back to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, my guest came back from her near-death experience with literal worlds of information. Joining me today, ladies and gentlemen, is near-death experiencer Sandi Taranto. Sandi, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely glad to have you on. Now, Sandi, I understand that your near-death experiences happened between the ages of 3 and 7. So you were very young when you had these multiple near-death experiences. Is that so?
Yes, that's correct. I did have two later on in life, but the bulk of them took place in my childhood.
Amazing. So what I usually do on this show is I usually get some historical context about the person's religious upbringings or belief systems. But being that you were so young, I guess I have to pose the question, did you have any belief system in a God and an afterlife, etc., at the young, ripe ages that you had your near-death experiences?
I did not at the time, although I was being raised by people who were very Christian, and people would consider them a cult. So it was actually a negative thing for me from my experiences. I was suffering a lot during that time, and they were very abusive people. Their the words God and Jesus and those things were not good words to me because of the way that they used them as kind of a weapon, really. So I did not go into the experience with any established sense of religion of my own, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Growing up in a particular household like that. And I also understand that there was abuse in the house, which ultimately led to your first near death experience. Why don't you talk to us about that? Your very first recollection of your very first near death experience, as I know you've had 3 to 5, perhaps.
I've had around 8 during that time frame, I think. Most of them I consider to not be very interesting. I tried to focus on the interesting ones, the ones that I thought people would be more informed by. So it's hard for me to say. I think that my first one was actually my void experience, which I wrote about at the end of my NDERF account after all of there are questions that you can answer, interview questions, and I went through all of those. And at the end, I wrote my void near-death experience. And for me, it was a void, but it wasn't wasn't afraid. I didn't feel any fear whatsoever. I was in a dark space. For me, there were no stars, no suns, no moons. It was just blackness. And every once in a while, there would be a flash of pink or, kind of a blue or purple, different colors, but mostly just flashes of light there. And what I call my attendant, other people might call it an angel or guide or whatever feels most comfortable. It didn't care what I called it. And I have no opinion on the matter. I just call it my attendant. My attendant was there. I just sensed it as a presence near me. We just were there, and I was very happy, and I was kind of turning somersaults, almost like if you think about a baby in the womb before it gets too tight. I was doing somersaults and just enjoying the feeling of existing and the wonderful sense of presence and warmth and love that was just all around me. That was not something that was a familiar feeling to me in the situation that I was in, and I was just greatly loving it. And I asked the being with me, I said, am I getting born? So, I still kept kind of that childlike demeanor, which is not typical of most of my near-death experiences. It happened in that one, but most of them I was a far advanced intelligence compared to anything on Earth. But in this one, am I getting born was such a reasonable question for me. And the being said to me, this is the first time. So I said, this is my first mommy. And it's was kind of, well, sort of. Sure, that works. And I finally, as I was turning more somersaults and just basking in the sense of love, all of a sudden I understood. And I kind of, so communication there is telepathic. So kind of said to my um, attendant, hmm, hmm. And it said, this is the womb of creation. And in that moment, I was just flooded with understanding and knowledge because I was kind of asking, what am I sensing here? And all of a sudden, I understood that souls decide to come into being within the mind of God, the divine being. I call it the divine mind, the divine being. We decide to come into existence in that. Like one moment we exist where a moment before we hadn't. And it's because we chose to. And it's very confusing for us as humans where if you didn't exist, how did you choose to exist? I don't know, but that's how it works. And I essentially said to my friend, my attendant, I came into existence when I knew love. When I knew love, I knew myself. And that's the truth of our being in general. When you know love, you know yourself, your true self. If you do an unkind act, you're not knowing yourself and you're not being yourself. So that was kind of my introduction to what was to become a semi common experience through that horrible time in my life.
Well, it seems like we're getting to the wisdom very early here in this interview. Uh, Interesting that you had a void experience where you felt nothing but love. Many near-death experiencers do talk about entering into a dark void, and even though it's dark, they're still covered by this love. And sometimes there's an entity there with them, sometimes there is not. Moving into another one of your near-death experiences, I know there was one that occurred at the hands of a foster parent who was strangling you. Why don't you go back to that one and tell us what you saw there?
A number of them happened from that same reason, but I think I know which one you're specifically asking me about. In this particular near death experience, I popped out of my body and I turned to look at my body, and my attendant was there. And I was a little worried. I remember feeling a little worried because somehow I just knew that we were going on an extended tour. So I said to my attendant, will there be enough time? And that's when it told me, time will not pass here while we are there. And that's very significant because it helps us understand the nature of time between Earth and the other side. But that wasn't the day that we were going to talk about that. On this one, I was taken to, I was taken out among the planets and the stars and the moons, which was something that I very much enjoyed. I loved going out and just floating in space and playing out there. So my attendant took me to a moon and another planet and some suns, and then it took me to another planet. When I traveled there, it was different for me than for most people in near-death experiences. I didn't go through a tunnel. It felt like one minute I'm here and the next minute I'm there. Just kind of instant. There we are. And I popped into being at the foot of these massive fronds, plant fronds, or seaweed. It was a water planet. completely covered in water. There was no land on this planet whatsoever. It was just here I was in, I'd say, the middle level of this planet with the seaweed just towering up and going down into nowhere. And there were beings there. And the beings there were what we would call mermaids. They were human-esque-ish. Their eyes were not all the way on the side, but they also weren't all the way in front. We have our eyes all the way in front, but theirs were just slightly set off. We would think they looked kind of odd with their eyes set off that way. Also, their fin, the classic mermaid has a their the bottom of their body is a fin or a tail with a fin. And most of the time on, you see TV shows, etc., the mermaids' tails are like this. If they flop their tail up like this, the fins are like that. But these beings' fins were hard for me to do, but they were front to back. They weren't side to side. And I found that very interesting later when I started seeing mermaid drawings and mermaid pictures and mermaids on TV. They're doing it wrong. That's not how they look. And they also had webbed hands. Their finger, like the tips were very short. There were webs all the way, the whole hand was webs. Um, I found them quite fascinating, and I really did want to go and talk to them, but my attendant uh, had expressed to me that we always respect the desires of any person, place, or thing that we go to. And these beings, from a soul level, were expressing that they did not want to be approached by spirits. So I did not approach them. Instead, we went down deeper into the water, close to the only land on the planet, which was the core of the planet. Here we met with rather dolphin-like beings, I would say, and they lived in these caves that were they were just there was bioluminescence everywhere on this planet. So the mermaids had bioluminescence, the seaweed had bioluminescence, and these creatures down here lived in these caves that were just they were essentially made like coral, the same way that coral is. But I didn't know about coral at the time. So I just understood that they were made of living creatures, like the walls were made of living creatures. There were gigantic tube-like structures that had beings living in them. And like we have on Earth, we have algae blooms. There would be algae blooms every, I'm thinking decades in our time. And these creatures would come up out of their tubes and open up and just, take the algae out of the water with, feelers that would catch the algae. And those were probably the only creatures on that planet that actually consumed another kind of living thing. Although death is very different there, and it's very different on most of the planets that I saw. Death is just, okay, I'm done, I'll go. And there's no, we tend to struggle to die. We can be killed, etc. And there, they just, when they decide to, drop the body just think of vampires on TV. They just poof into dust, and that's essentially what happens. So those creatures would eat other creatures. The pod that I was with called for another pod, and I'm sorry, they call dolphin groups pods. So I'm just calling it a pod because I don't have another word for it. They called for another pod, and while they were on the way, the pod that I was with showed me their extensive caves and how beautiful it was, and it really was exquisite. Think of the movie Avatar, but far more beautiful. And of course, when you're over there, I could see colors that we can't see here. So it was a full spectrum of colors, far above and beyond what we can see here. They're not neon colors, they're just other colors. I don't know how to explain it well for, human beings who have three, we have rods and cones, and those give us three colors. So a spectrum of three colors. After they got done with the tour, the other pod had arrived, and the first pod uh, asked me for my blessing because they had helped me by showing me around and giving me this gift of seeing the beauty. And so I did. I blessed them and said, for your kindness to me, you will evolve more quickly and ascend faster. And I don't mean ascend in the spiritual sense. I mean on their planet, the more evolved the creatures got, the higher they went up in the water. So I was saying that, you will evolve in intelligence, et cetera, more quickly. The second pod kind of swirled around me until they made what was essentially a sphere of just moving bodies around me. And there was a sense of play and joy to it, but they were also taking away and diffusing a lot of my grief and pain, because what I was going through there, I was in intense grief and I was experiencing tremendous suffering. So they kind of just helped transmute or unchain some of that. So they, in their turn, asked for a blessing, and I blessed them the same way, that they would rise faster in evolution, and we went back to my body, and I was very, just imagine being in that stunning, beautiful place, and now you have to come back here as a violently abused, horrifically stark, tortured child, and it was very difficult. So I stood with him, my attendant, for a bit, and finally I said, I don't want to go back. And it said, if you come home, there's no judgment. You will be loved and welcomed and celebrated. And what you've done so far is amazing. So if you want to come home, come home. And I did want to. Yet there was another part of me, and I'm assuming that's my higher self, my soul, that intense, intrinsic peace that said, I've got to go back. I have things I have to do. I've got to go back. And I did.
Now, that story in and of itself has a lot of significance with me. It's one of the reasons why I actually contacted you to come on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and share your account. Your other accounts are just as amazing as well, but that particular one resonates with me because I interviewed a lady not too long ago by the name of Vina Hill, who had a very similar experience to yours.
But the world was an aquatic world, and there was no real land masses on this world. Everything was underneath, and my guide took us below the water at some point, And the creatures that I saw, I mean, actual mermaids. Another thing too, were the structures. They were just gorgeous underneath. And I remember wondering to myself, who built them and how could they be built? Like I realized that the mer people, which I call them, more than likely built them, but I'm not even positive about that. But it was just an observation that I'd made, that how could these structures be underwater? They were just gorgeous. They had like a self-lighting, like a bioluminescence to them.
And when I originally heard her account, I said, wow, that is a complete outlier when it comes to near-death experiences. I've heard many similarities: light, tunnel, telepathic communication, seeing deceased relatives, but I had never heard of anyone that went into another planet. I've heard people go all out of the exosphere and into space, but specifically go onto this other planet and mingle with its inhabitants and come into contact with beings like mermaids. Until I read the NDERF website, where you know there's thousands of near-death experiences on there, and yours is one of them. And for the very first time, I I read your mermaid account, and it just blew me away. I immediately contacted you. You know, Facebook is very slow, especially when you're dealing with Messenger. Sometimes it takes people a year or two to even see the message. So I'm surprised you only saw it in about a month or two. But
I
when
might
you
not
read
check it
this,
very often.
yes, when you saw the video I presented to you, what was your take on that?
Oh, I was so excited. I I am beside myself. I really am. I was so excited. I was like, that's it. That's the planet. Look, I was there. Hey, anybody? Hey, guys. So I was amazed. And I did post about it on Reddit, and somebody said, well, the skeptics are just going to say that she copied you. And I'm like, here's the thing. You could say that about all the parts of near-death experiences. The amazing thing, and one of the most uncanny things about near-death experiences, is that so many of us have such similar experiences. And you already touched on them a little bit. But I feel like if you start oh, well, I don't believe that part because somebody else saw that. I don't believe that part because somebody else saw that. I don't believe this part because of, like, where do you stop? At what point does it become silly? Okay, well, hey, since pretty much the beginning of recorded history, people have been seeing the tunnel. So are we all going to agree that maybe that one's not uh, copied? Or are we going to say, well, everybody's been knowing about each other's near-death experiences since the beginning of recorded history, even though they're on different places in the planet and have no communication? So to me, first off, why would she need to make it up? And why would I need to make it up? And I know I didn't make it up. I know I didn't read hers first. And I don't think she read mine first either. There are some details that are different. I don't know how many moons it had. And I think she said something about how many moons it had. I was in the water. I wasn't looking up at the moon. I do know that it was a binary sun system. She didn't say anything about that. So, there are details that I couldn't certify with, was it exactly for sure for real the same planet? But it's hard to me to imagine that it's not the same planet. And the thing that fascinates me the most about it personally is that would be something that a lot of skeptics talk about. Well, there are none of the same places. It's all different over there. Everybody has a completely different near-death experience. None of them are alike. And yet this would be a very powerful statement of, she said that she was looking at a physical location. I said I was looking at a physical location, and these physical locations add up. They line up. There's so I I personally find this exhilarating. Your mileage may vary, but I find it absolutely exhilarating.
As do I. And there was a particular word you both used also, bioluminescence. You both used that exact same word in both interviews. So it had, and if I had to guess, if I had to put money down on it, I would say it's exactly the same planet you were both on.
I think it was. I just, the only difference that I have to say is that I really feel like it was in our physical reality. And she did say something about it being in the fourth dimension and not being in our dimension. But then again, I also, from based on my near-death experiences, don't really kind of believe in dimensions. So I think it's all taking place within the same framework. So even with that, I don't think that's a discrepancy.
Yeah, and perception, human perception has to take some sort of place in this too. She may have come back and perceived that she was in another dimension where she could have been exactly where you
Or
were.
me.
Correct. I want to talk about another near-death experience you had, and I believe this was also by way of strangulation. Unfortunately, as you stated earlier, that did happen very often with you. But in this particular near-death experience, you had communication with something you thought was God or perceived was God, and there was this knowledge that you received from this communication. Do you recall which one I'm referring to?
Of course, yes. The few that I wrote about on the NDERF website, that's one that people come back to frequently, probably the most frequently. In this near-death experience, my friend took me out into space and I was playing again. I might have mentioned I really like playing in space. And we kind of talked a bit like you do there telepathically. When finally it took me to a place near Nebula, and we just kind of hung in space for a couple minutes. And, in Earth time, we would consider it a couple of minutes of just quiet. And then it said to me, "What is the question that you want to ask, but you have not been asking?" And it was true. There was one burning question. And I will remind people I was around 5 years old. So this was a perfectly reasonable question to a 5-year-old. I'm just saying, perfectly reasonable. And you'll get what I'm saying in a minute. So I kind of turned to it in, expressively. I expressed turning to kind of give it my full attention. And I said, "Why?" And that one question held an entire universe of inquiry. Why am I suffering? Why does suffering exist? Why is there a planet where suffering exists? Why do the things I love get killed? Why am I being strangled to death as punishment for unrelated things? Why? Why is this all happening? Why me? I don't understand. And my friend took me into the presence of the divine being. That's what I refer to it as, the divine being, God. And the answer was essentially because the divine being is a paradox. So I call it the divine paradox. The divine being is utterly unlimited, and it is only unlimited. The divine being is love, and it is only love, which means it is limited to only love, which makes it not unlimited. And that's a problem. To be unlimited, the divine being must experience limitation. To be unlimited, the divine being must experience something besides love. So I understood all of that just in an instance, but I still kind of didn't really get it. I needed more. So my attendant took me out into the universe and across numerous planets and places and showed me indescribable beauty, indescribable places, absolute stunning. Think of the most beautiful things on earth: waterfalls, mountain ranges, ocean floor, all of the most beautiful things on earth, and then magnify that by billions of planets. It is the universe just teems with life and beauty. And in particular, I remember a number of planets, but two of them constantly, with the mermaid planet, these two other planets just are constantly on my heart. They're just amazing, the beauty of them. The first planet had 3 symbiotic creatures or races. I guess creatures is a little bit of a rude word, sorry. It had 3 symbiotic races. The first one, they were all primate-like races, but the first one walked on all 4s. And they had hands like we have, except they could curl them up like this. And there were hard, like bony cartilage something on there. So they could walk on that like hooves. So they kind of had hooves on, front and back. And there was another race that would, kind of hang off their belly. And that was a primate race as well. And they would hang off the belly of the traveler. I might call them the traveling. And they were companions. And then they had a third race that also was with them. The second race created huts that all 3 would live in. And the third race kind of did the cleaning up, and the third race was very, very similar to us, like Cro-Magnon man, but with slightly less of that knobby protrusion that we think of with them. But they weren't, fully human-esque. These beings, the third ones, the ones that like did kind of the cleaning up and helping, could see us, myself and my attendant. They could see us, and they raised their hands, both hands up like this, like hello, hello, hello. And as soon as they did that, the other 2 races did the same thing. And it's kind of funny because I remember one of the kind of horse-like-ish, the traveler ones, sitting up to raise its hands, and his companion that he had with him almost fell off. So he stops and raises his hand to hello, hello, and the other 2 races couldn't see us, so they're just kind of waving wherever until they're seeing, oh, you're over here, okay. It was really adorable, and especially to me as a child, that felt so fun. And I just have to say, I think I wrote this in on the Endorf account, but I don't remember for sure. I wanted to be a horse as a child, and I really, really wanted to be a horse my whole childhood. Whenever people would say, you can be anything you want, well, I'm going to be a horse then. I mean, those beings were horse-like and they could be that, so why couldn't I be that? It's the logic of a child. It's lovely. The next planet had these massive crystal structures. And the really amazing thing about this was that these crystals would grow into those shapes according to the singing of the people who lived there. It kind of like every day, one group would come and they would sing to the crystals. And then the next day, the next group would sing to the crystals. And then the next group, each had their appointed time to sing to the crystals. And that was how they kind of communicated with them and told them who was going to be living there. And by telling them who was going to be living in that abode, that crystal shape would shape into whatever was needed for who was going to be living there. So if 3 people were going to be living there, it would create accommodation for 3 people. If 7 people were going to be living there, it would grow into an accommodation for 7 people. And it's so hard to explain, but it was like they literally understood each other. And it's the same kind of crystal that we have on Earth. So, there's a part of me that thinks we should be able to sing to crystal and make it grow in a certain way, I think. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. They were very beautiful crystalline structures, and they also housed creatures up in the top. There were like kind of flying squirrel-like creatures, and they would jump from one to the next, and they would put their legs out and sail over to the next one and land and sail to the next one. They were so beautiful. The entire thing was just stunning. If you take some incredibly beautiful picture or drawing or something, it doesn't even approach the splendor of that planet with all of its crystal houses. It was phenomenal. The beings there had clothes. They did wear clothes, but they didn't need them the way we do. It wasn't about germs. It wasn't about protection. They loved to dance, and they did these swirling, beautiful dances, and the cloth would just trail around them. It was this fascinating, beautiful, stunning display in amongst the crystal houses with them singing. It was phenomenal. Something that I think is important to understand about these planets, and that does include the first planet we talked about with the mermaids. Everything lived from the power of the sun. Nobody ate something living to survive. Nobody had to consume anything. They did not have digestive systems because they didn't need them. The sun, our sun, is most of these systems where I saw life, maybe all of them were binary or even trinary systems. They were not one star systems. And I believe that our solar system was specifically made in a way that we have to consume things, and other systems creatures of beings of other systems don't have to. Once we finished there, I looked at a few other wonderful, amazing, beautiful things. And then once more, I stopped to talk with my attendant, or my attendant stopped me. And we sat for a bit. And then it said, that's why you solved the paradox. And I understood, because that's the way that the telepathic communication over there works, is that you gain an entire concept in an instant. And I understood that we come here out of love, because if the paradox of the divine being were not solved, everything would come undone. Everything would cease to exist. That the divine being, in its love for all the things that it has created, became souls. And when it became souls, it came here and a tiny, tiny few other planets in other universes, and solved the paradox by experiencing everything that the divine being itself cannot: pain, sorrow, regret, community, falling in love. You can't fall in love with something or someone when you already love everything fully and unconditionally. The divine being doesn't know loneliness. It doesn't know what it means to be alone in a group of people until it does through us. So it's very interesting to have that realization that all of those beautiful things that I saw and loved so much and felt such tremendous joy at, everyone here, every single human being here, no matter how good or how evil, is helping those things exist. And whenever we choose to do something that's loving, you can choose to do, if you see a puppy, you can choose to kick it, or you can choose to pick it up and love it and give it food and hug it and pet it and find a home for it. These are two opposite ends of the spectrum. And when we choose love, we actually grow the universe. The love that we express here in this place, where love is not the automatic default for everything, every decision for love grows the universe. It creates more love, and love is life's longing for itself. So it creates more love and more life. That's what I learned in that near-death experience.
So it's almost kind of like when astrophysicists say that the universe is expanding. It's expanding based on our love.
Yeah.
In a sense, from a higher spiritual perspective. Also, what I got out of that is we seem to be a lower level planet, whereas they are, as you stated, binary, trinary systems, where we have a singular system where we have to consume living things in order to have energy, in order to go on and live. They just seem like they're so much more above that. Although many near-death experiencers say that prior to the soul coming into the earthly realm, for some reason or another, we chose this one. We chose this planet for whatever reason or whatever purpose we came to fulfill. And perhaps what you just said could be some strong points for that.
It is what I was told, that we do come here by choice. And I hear many things about it's a learning place. We're, learning how to choose love, all of these things. And I just respectfully can't agree with that. I believe that when we are souls, they're just one kind of soul. All souls are souls. And the default is love. we have these bodies, we have this environment because we need something, the body, to limit us. And we need something to make us not naturally default to love, the brain. This experience is not necessarily lower. I would call it maybe, I kind of like the word denser, but that doesn't make it lesser. Like we as humans, we like to put a hierarchy on everything. Those planets are better. Those planets are above. Those planets just exist. And this planet has a purpose, and it's an incredible purpose. I mean, life, the purpose of this planet is life, not here, but everywhere. So, like I said, love is life's longing for itself. This place only, I hate to make people think of a hierarchy here, but only spiritual heavyweight champions can come here. This is hard. To be in a place where love is not your default is really hard. It is some of the hardest work in the universe. And really, it's the only work in the universe. If you're out there, it's play. It's all play. Think of a kitten playing with a ball of string, or a little mouse toy. They are just playing. They're just playing. Think of a child, they've picked up their little toy truck and they're just playing. And they're not bored, they're not upset, they're not miserable, they're not in pain, they're happy. And it's very easy when you're happy and filled with joy and peace to default to love. If you're very happy and you see a kid crying, hey, are you okay? Come here, let me give you a hug. Let's make things better. It's very easy when you're angry to be like, what are you crying about? There's nothing to be upset about. Come on, we gotta go. It's over, rawr. And that's not happening in other places. That's out, those planets that I was talking about out there, they're not struggling. They're not fighting. It's play. This is work. This is really hard work. So you've got to be strong. You got to be able to be here and go through stuff. And you are a spiritual heavyweight champion. If you are here, you are powerful. You couldn't be here. You couldn't be here otherwise. This place sucks. Ask one person on the street. Go up to a random person on the street. How many of them are going to admit, yeah, Earth kind of sucks. It's hard. It's hard to be here. It sucks. It's just many tears here. There's no tears out there. No tears. So is this planet worse than other planets? Yes, on one way, but on the other, there are so many, everything in the universe depends on souls coming here and doing this hard thing that we do. Did I get completely lost on your actual
No, not
question?
at all. Very interesting
Okay.
concept. Adds to more of the literature and the theoretical perspectives on existence, why we're here, why we're not there, etc. Next thing I want to ask you about is your after effects. Many near-death experiencers come back totally changed after their near-death experiences. Again, I know you had multiple near-death experiences. Some of them say that they have higher empathy levels, lack of fear of death. They may have some precognition, some electrical anomalies when they walk past the microwave. Did you come back with anything remotely close to these?
Yes. Some of them I don't really like to talk about. They're very, very woo-woo. So I'm not going to get too much into that. I have some weird electric things. That has really diminished over the decades, fortunately, because I pretty much couldn't keep light bulbs burning. Um, in fact, now I buy those like the 5-year LEDs, and they go out in about a year. So they don't really last around me. Still, it used to be with incandescent light bulbs, they would go out in a week, 2 weeks. So I used to actually have boxes and boxes of them because I just couldn't keep them. Also, I did have problems with watches. I gave up on wearing watches decades ago, decades before cell phones. I gave up on wearing watches. My last cell phone, the battery, and all my cell phones, the battery would be going along just fine, 65%, and then all of a sudden, 2%. Why? 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 We're just 65. Oh, whatever. Okay. Yeah, it's the thing. I also have kind of a funny thing that's fun, and it feels kind of like a parlor trick in a way. I play video games and I like to play them with other people. So the creatures that you're fighting are often called mobs, and they have what's called aggro, which means who they decide to pick on. And people started noticing that mobs would aggro me first, even if I was not the person who was supposed to be targeted. And I at first actually thought that I had made, one of the game makers angry and they had kind of like programmed it. So, oh, she's going to get it. But then I moved to a different game and the same thing happened. And then I moved to a different game and the same thing happened. And one of my friends, when we first became friends, I said, I have this weird thing and I'm just going to tell you right now, all the mobs will aggro me. It's like, yeah, sure. Okay. And now we joke about it because they always aggro me. So it's just hilarious because I will tell people this and they'll be like, no, that's not how it works. It's programmed that way. It doesn't work that way. That's not going to happen. And then they're like, why? Who did you make mad? So that was fun to me and funny. Um, I also have some kind of negative emotional and psychological effects because I know that it's so much better over there and because my life was so hard. I've been suicidal all of my life since then, and that has been a very difficult road. Um, to live a difficult life and know that so much better is just a heartbeat away. And that also makes it hard because I try to encourage other people to live because we're here for good reason. And when I see a human being, I know that they came here out of love and that they wanted, when they came here, to complete this work and to do this work and to be here for the universe and for themselves and for each other. And so I really try to encourage them to live. But sometimes it's hard because I feel like there's some hypocrisy in that. Like, how can I say to you, I want you to live when I don't want to do it? So that is very tricky. And that is a really hard line for me to find and walk with people. Why, if I'm I'm not going to say unwilling because I'm still here, but if I'm wanting so badly to go, it's difficult to say, but I don't want you to go. So, that's been a complexity. And the attendant did tell me before the here's why you're here. You come here on purpose and you choose to come here and you do it out of love. Before it told me that, it said, you'll be happier and your life will be easier if you don't ask this and don't know this. And I demanded that it tell me anyway. And there have been many, many a time that I wish I had not, because, I can tell that to people and yet I have resentment about it. Like, and I know that it's in a way kind of absurd, but I feel like, my soul chose this. I didn't choose this. It's the same thing, but that doesn't stop me from being mad about it. No, no, doesn't stop me a bit. I'm still mad. Screw you, soul. And I've even at times said, that's easy for you to make this decision when I'm the one that has to live it. So you go sit in the corner. Yeah.
And I think therein lies the great paradox that we also spoke about earlier.
That I think that's probably most of what I can think of that I had different. I am very intuitive, uncannily, oftentimes. I'm I think I've always been very empathetic, and that may be from my near-death experiences, but a lot of times people who experience significant trauma can be very empathetic as well. So I don't feel like that might have been, it was probably a combination. Like anytime something happens, it's hard to say it was this or it was that when both have kind of a same likely outcome. A lot of people with trauma, they are like, screw the world. I'm gonna just wreck everything. Often themselves with addictions or whatever. And sometimes they do that. And also what some other people do, which is, you know what? This terrible thing happened to me. And I just choose to do the best I can to understand and be kind because, like, I kind of don't know what else to do. And we all have our own struggles, and so I think that empathy is a choice and a decision. And I was just talking to somebody today about the fact that reading fiction, they've said, they scientifically reading fiction can you make you more empathetic. So if you're trying to be more empathetic, read some fiction.
I guess I better lay off the true crime.
Oh dear.
With that said, you, speaking of reading, you did publish a book a while back about your life experiences. However, it does not include any of your near-death experiences. Have you
Nope.
ever thought about sitting down and writing a book specifically about your wondrous near-death experiences?
Yes, I have. And I'm starting to think that maybe I'm just going to go ahead and do that. A few things have kept me from doing that. One of them is this prevailing attitude that if a person who had a near-death experience writes a book, they're a greedy fraud, blah, 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 blah. And I've just decided that, you know what? The plumber has to eat. The electrician has to eat. The neurosurgeon has to eat. Why does everybody have to eat but me? Why can somebody write a true crime book and they're not a fraud and they're not a greedy bastard? And then the fact that people who write books about near-death experiences, they don't even make enough to eat on. Like seriously, it's a pittance. So most people think of writers and they think of J.K. Rowling and they're like, "Oh, you wrote a book? You're like rich as J.K. Rowling and you're out to make bajillions and you're gonna, lie for whatever." And I've just decided you know, the first thing that people don't understand about near-death experiences, the near-death experience, it's beautiful. Being dead is lovely, amazing. But you know what's not? The dying part. That's traumatic and it's horrible. And many people who have had near-death experiences, many people who have had near-death experiences struggle. We have PTSD. I'm going on disability if it's approved because, you know, my life has been really hard and really painful, and I would still like to eat. This idea that we come back and we write books and we become instant millionaires is just such nonsense. And I have all this information sitting in my head that I sat on for decades because I was terrified of telling people about it. I was punished horrendously for telling about my near-death experiences as a child. So I'm terrified. I'm terrified of religious people who are the ones who basically tortured me for talking about my near-death experiences. So with all of that, I have all that knowledge sitting in my head. And, you know, I don't even know how long we've been at this, over an hour, I think it is. And I haven't touched on a fraction of all the information that I was given. The best way for me to give all that information is, I think, in a book. So if I sit in fear of the people who are going to claim that I'm a fraud, I'll never get that information out. It's too much. It's too significant. I don't know how else I could even think of doing it. So, yes, I have been thinking about it and I think I'm probably going to do it.
I totally agree with you. And I really do hope that you do go forth with writing a book and sharing this abundant knowledge with many people out there who need to hear this type of information. How we're loved, how compassion and kindness and mercy is very important, and how we're ultimately expanding the universe through it. Well, Sandi, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your absolutely fascinating account.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been very pleasant.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Sandi Taranto.